Excellent. All right, folks. So I put a link here. A lot of things I'm going to reference today are on our website. So all the forms that I'm going to cover and all of the actual law and regulations is in there. And I've included some links during the presentation that you can view for extra credit tonight when you are really burning up with questions about nutrient management. But the first thing I wanted to start with was just kind of a statement, and you know, farmers, you know, they need help, you know, and we have good relationships with them through the Soil Conservation District. So a lot of times they'll come into the office waving forms around saying, I need some help with this. But just FYI, we do have dedicated regional nutrient management specialists in each county that are dedicated to helping these folks. So a lot of these forms that are required are legally binding documents. So it's really not that great of an idea to get in too deep with helping these folks on some of this stuff. So these folks listed here are your really the front line of defense for that help. So don't feel like you have to sit down and fill out an AIR or something with somebody. Just pass along this information and they can help. So first of all, before we get into the requirements of a plan, we need to figure out who needs a nutrient management plan. And it's fairly cut and dry, but there's some things that maybe throw people off. So any operation that has a gross annual income of $2,500 per year from the sale of any agricultural products, it doesn't matter if they're selling eggs at the end of their driveway or selling you know, bunches of flowers from their house. If they have $2,500 of gross income, they have to have a nutrient management plan to manage their nutrients.
Yeah, we aren't seeing your slides moving. You're still on your title page.
How's that?
That is good.
Interesting. Well, I guess you didn't see that slide, but there are all the folks that you could contact. All right, so yeah, if they have that gross annual income of $2,500 per year, they are in no matter what. They could also not make any income and have 8 animal units, which is defined as 8,000 pounds of live animal weight. So that could be 8 horses, 8 cows. If you get to that 8,000 pounds, no matter what your income is, you have to have a nutrient management plan as well. And this also includes no land operations, such as poultry houses that just have the chicken house, but no managed land really, as well as nursery or greenhouse. So if somebody's growing tomato plants in a greenhouse and they're selling them, they probably meet those requirements as well. And the nutrient management plan should be written in the name of that person that has that financial interest within the farm. So we can't write it in grandma's name and think that we're getting out of a legal requirement. So the person that's making those decisions for that operation needs to have the plan in their name. And who can write a nutrient management plan? There's really 2 pathways. The first and most popular is to become a Maryland certified nutrient management consultant. And that means you've passed the certification exam, which FYI for your new planners out there, they are going to be holding one this August. And this is the one that they have the training course beforehand. So be on the lookout for that. It's a good opportunity to get signed up and start studying now for that exam. I believe it's 100 questions and you need a 70 to pass. And once you pass that exam, congratulations, you are certified. And you have to also meet the training requirements to keep your certification current. Now, there are 2 options to have a plan written through a certified consultant, and that is private industry. A lot of cases, this will be seed dealers or fertilizer dealers that also offer those services. And those folks must also have a business license in order to legally write plans in Maryland. The other option, which is very popular, probably about 40% of our land is written by this public option through the University of Maryland Extension Office. And I put a link here to their program. We work in tandem with them. A lot of the recommendations or a lot of the processes that they have are synchronous with ours. The other option is folks can become certified to write their own plan by taking the Maryland Certified Farmer course. And just recently, this was offered online in addition to the in-person training. And that is a 2-day training. where at the end, they also have to pass a certified farmer exam. And during the course, they actually write a plan for their own operation as a means to complete it. So you go through that training course and boom, you are controlling your own destiny. You can write your own plan once you're certified. There are, of course, recertification requirements, and these pay attention because a lot of these questions may be on the exam. So for certified consultants, once you pass that initial certification, it's issued for only 1 year. And within that year, you have to have 6 hours of approved, what they call continuing education credits, in order to remain certified. After that first year, then you can renew it for 3-year periods. And within that 3-year period, you have to have 12 hours of approved training. Now, pro tip, if you really want to do it easily, every year Nutrient Management offers the Nutrient Management Update training. It was held at the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge, and recently it was held online. And that offers 6 credit hours. So if you go to that 2 years out of 3, you're doing what you need to do to keep your certification current. For Maryland certified farmers, they have to complete at least 2 hours of approved training within the first year. And to remain current after that, 6 hours within that next 3-year certification period. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that all of these certification levels have to comply with the requirements of writing a plan. So, as plans are reviewed by specialists and we do implementation reviews, if there's any deficiencies that are noted that are recurring, that could affect somebody's certification status. One thing that's really important recently for nutrient management plan writers is that we get information from them. And a lot of this is centered around the phosphorus management tool. So we are basically, by law, we are checking every 6 years the average soil phosphorus levels in all the land throughout the state. This is done in an anonymous manner so that we can't link who's who. But we are checking to see if this new PMT regulation that was adopted in 2015 is having an impact on drawing down phosphorus. So we just collected this data from all the consultants throughout the state in 2021, and we will do it again in 2027. And I personally am very curious to see over this last 6 years what impact this new PMT has had. And unfortunately, if folks choose that they don't want to submit this data, there is a $250 fine, but so far, so good. We haven't had to go that route. So my goodness, look at the words. What is included in a nutrient management plan? So this is an abbreviated list, but these are the absolute main things that need to be in there. So of course, in a certified plan, operator information and a summary of the operation of the farm, the management of the farm, how someone handles their manure, so on and so forth. The time period that a plan covers. And this gets people into trouble from time to time because some farmers assume that if they got their plan written 3 years ago, oh, it's still good. Well, that's not true. Most plans are actually only 1 year, and that's because plans change over time. If you're dealing with manure, you have to update your analysis every year. So most plans are 1 year. Really, the only plans that are 3 years are like nursery greenhouse, where maybe production doesn't change, or hay operations that don't deal with any organic sources of nutrients. So that's one thing that gets people jammed up sometimes. And that's the majority of issues that we would see when we did a new implementation review, was that folks didn't have their plan quite updated to reflect current conditions. Next thing, you got to have your parcel account identification number. So as you all know probably already, like with Conservation Tracker, we track everything at MDA on that parcel account level. So by doing that, we get a plan submitted to us with a new plan reporting form. We put all those account IDs into our database, and that says to us that that farm has a nutrient management plan, and we can check it off the list. Of course, farm maps are a big thing. FSA maps are totally, we can use them, they're totally fine, but they have to at least include the fields, the acreages, and the property boundary for that farm. Soil sample analyses for every field or management unit. So if basically fields that are have had the same cropping history or fertilizer application history can be grouped together as a management unit, but that is the kind of the baseline. Ideally, we see one for every field, but some farms are rented, and if it's the same management, fine. We can have larger soil samples. And these must be at least 3 years old or less than 3 years old from the time nutrients are applied. So sometimes that gets folks when they're trying to use old analyses and it doesn't quite meet the requirements. Manure organics analyses for all utilized. So whether you're generating the manure on farm or you're importing it, you have to analyze that for nutrient content. And one more recent thing is that for smaller operations that have less than 20 animal units, a book value may be used, and that book value is supplied by the University of Maryland. Animal information, including manure generation. So there's actual spreadsheets that can predict the amount of manure generation based on the management of the farm, and any imported or exported manure information, which of course with poultry litter is a big deal. So the nutrient application recommendations for each fertilizer input must be included, and that is based upon nitrogen and phosphorus needs of the intended crop, and as per the soil test results and even the tillage method. PMT calculations for fields above 150, but only those that will actually receive phosphorus application. So I'll explain in a second, but if you're at 150 FIV, you have enough phosphorus to grow just about any crop. But if folks are limited in the space and need to apply phosphorus, whether it be manure or commercial fertilizer, then they have to run that PMT. And then any nutrient application setback requirements should be included as well. And a little more extra credit, I have a link here if you want to view the actual regs that lists out all of the other exhaustive stuff that I'm not going to cover today, but please feel free to do so. So the real basis of nutrient management is all centered around a proper soil sample. And you can talk to 10 people and they'll tell you 10 different ways to get an adequate sample, but this here is the actual guidance which all of the University of Maryland research is based on. And so just to clear it up now before y'all get confused by bad information, a soil sample for nutrient management is 8 inches, no matter what. For cropland, pasture land, every situation is an 8-inch core. Some folks will try to confuse you and say, oh, you only need 2 inches for pasture. That is not true. 8-inch sample is the standard. That's what all the research is based on, so that's what we need to do. And it should be taken sporadically throughout the field, at least 15 to 20 cores for an adequate sample, avoiding those areas that aren't like the majority of the field. And, you know, we all know the people that go out in the middle of the field and just take a shovel out there, take one scoop, put it in the bucket, and that's their soil sample. That basically makes their nutrient management plan useless. Without an adequate, well-taken sample, which is the foundation for all the recommendations, we can't do this job properly. And that's the kind of stuff that we do pick up on from plan to plan, because nutrient values don't change much in 3 years. So if something looks wrong, we'll be able to figure out why. So you get your soil test results back, and the plan writer will convert them into what's called the fertility index value scale. So every lab has their own extraction method, whether it be Malick or Bray, and they have their own meanings. And labs will often send an idea to the farmer of what those values mean. But years ago, University of Maryland collaborated with all of the soil testing labs and figured out what does a value of 100 for Bray mean compared to a value of 100 for Malick. And so they developed this fertility index value scale to kind of homogenize and make that process more simple for writing a nutrient management plan. And it's a simple scale, 0 to 25 low. That means a yield response is likely if you add that nutrient. 26 to 50, it's possible, not guaranteed, but possible that you'll see a yield response. 51 to 100, it's unlikely. This is all based on that response curve research they did for corn, soybeans, all the different crops that really kind of plateaued at that medium range where they weren't seeing that yield response by adding any more phosphorus or potash or whatever. And if you're excessive or above 100, you are wasting your money. Okay, so this is a typical printout from a nutrient management plan that shows that conversion of the values from the lab into that Maryland FIV, and it gives the cooperator an idea of which fields have good fertility for nutrient content and which need improvement. Whereas in this example, it looks like phosphorus and potash are borderline low to medium, so this person would definitely see a recommendation for those nutrients in their plan. So in terms of generating recommendations, the plan writers, by and large, use Newman Pro software to develop those recommendations. And I have a link there if you want to learn more about that program. A lot of you MDA folks probably have it already preloaded on your laptops, if it's an MDA laptop, that is. And this program, you put in all of the soil information and all of the intended crops, and it actually gives a specific recommendation based on those FIV values and the yield goals that are established for that crop. Now, use of this software is not mandated. You can write a plan by hand. I would hate to do that. There's a lot of equations, but you could do it if you wanted to. But Newman Pro is an easy way to do it. Nutrient recommendations within the plan are based upon that University of Maryland research and that FIV scale and those yield goals. And they are all summarized in that SFM1 document where they list out all of the crops, all of the FIV ranges, and the recommended nutrients. And one important point to know is that nitrogen and phosphorus are the only two regulated nutrients within the nutrient management plan. The plan recommends lime, magnesium, calcium, sulfur, manganese, all the secondary macronutrients and micronutrients as well. But the only two that legally have to be in the plan are nitrogen and phosphorus. Producers cannot exceed the maximum rate recommended within their plan for every given field and crop. So while Newman Pro gives a specific rate, they cannot exceed that range for that FIV value. And I'll show you what I mean in the next slide. So here's the chart taken directly from that SFM1 document. And as you can see here, there are different ranges for each crop listed based on a low. So actually somebody with a low FIV for phosphorus for corn could apply up to 135 pounds of phosphorus. Now, of course, that range is 0 to 25 within the FIV. So Newman Pro is going to give a more specific recommendation based on that value, which again means that taking a good soil test is extremely important to get the best number to kind of make your operation more efficient and lower your input costs. So here's a typical nutrient or fertilizer recommendation sheet that is given to the cooperator in the plan. This looks very similar on the Newman Pro printout, but it just documents all of the yield goals, all of the field characteristics, and any nitrogen credits that may exist from previous crops or manure. And then it gives you a total recommendation. Also gives you a lime recommendation as well, based on soil type and pH. So this is really the nuts and bolts of what farmers turn to. They'll skip over a lot and go straight to this to see what they can apply. As far as application requirements, anyone that applies nutrients to 10 acres or more must hold one of the following. So they either have to be a certified consultant, have their certified farmer certificate, or they have to have a nutrient applicator voucher. That's that little card that folks carry around with them when they go to the fertilizer store and buy fertilizer. They have to show that. And that requires 2 hours of training every 3 years in order to keep it current. So, and believe me, the voucher classes most likely are tied into some other type of event, and you have to listen to MDA give their talk at the end, and that gives you your 2 hours. So it's not a hard thing to do. Anybody can get one. Even grandma can get one, even though the plan's not in her name. Persons who apply nutrients for hire, they have to be a certified consultant or work under the supervision of a certified consultant. And those folks, those fertilizer dealers or spreaders, they have to make available to the landowner documentation of that certification when they do any work for them. A lot of times that'll be in the form of a receipt for services provided. We have an exhaustive list of all the certified applicators out there, so we know who they are. and they have to also apply nutrients as per the NMP. But the legal requirement is on the operator. So the operator needs to have that conversation with whoever they hire to say, I need you to apply only what my plan will allow, because legally it all comes back on the operator. Another thing to mention is that all of this equipment that's used, whether it be that injector you see there or that fertilizer spreader, we have to have calibration records of that application equipment. A lot of times, we're not sure what we're doing when we're spreading manure. We have an idea. University of Maryland actually offers calibration services to folks. So that's a good option if folks need to get their manure spreader calibrated, but we do need to see that documentation. So in terms of the spring and fall, what can you do? So following your plan in the spring and summer, which is defined as March 1st through September 9th, you can inject or incorporate organic fertilizer within 48 hours. But that accepts those operations that are choosing to go no-till. But if you are working up the land, you have to incorporate that manure. Application is prohibited on soil that is saturated, ground is covered with snow, all of those kind of common sense things that we don't want to do. And MDA does reserve the right during this period to require any incorporation of organic sources on a case-by-case basis. As you all probably know, the complaints start flooding in around March 1st, and today is March 1st, so far my phone has not rang. Fall applications, that's determined by, the period is September 10th through December 15th. You also have to incorporate unless you are no-till, and you have to apply those nutrient sources to an existing crop or crop that will be planted. And if that's the case, if it's a fallow field, then you have to plant a cover crop by November 15th if that application is manure. Again, if the ground is frozen, do not spread anything. And if an application of organic materials is related to a crop to be planted in the following spring, for whatever reason, if you're trying to clear out your manure storage shed because you won't have the capacity over the winter and need it, if you do have to do that, you can only apply up to 50 pounds of plant available nitrogen through that source. And again, in the fall, we do reserve the right to require incorporation.
And
in the winter,
minutes left.
All right, cool. In the winter, December 16th to February 28th, no commercial fertilizer may be applied. There's only one stipulation, that's for small grains in the springtime for green up. But you have to follow the recommendations in your plan for that. Organic fertilizer must meet those criteria that are listed there. And for y'all, the sake of time, I'm not going to run through them, but any application in the winter that's done through manure has to be done in concert with MDA. So you have to call your regional specialist or headquarters and tell them of what you need to do, and then we can make sure that all of these other check marks are taken care of. If it's a stackable manure, so it's less than 60% moisture, you have to stack it, and there are different requirements for stockpiling as well. Phosphorus management tool regulations, this came into effect back in 2015. It placed an immediate ban on phosphorus on fields at 500 FIV or more. Basically, the PMT is an update to the PSI, the phosphorus site index. They updated the research regarding the loss pathways on phosphorus. And the way it was chosen to be implemented was kind of phase it in over several years. But as of July 1 of this year, every farm that has fields above 150 PFIV will have to implement the PMT. The PMT advisory committee met periodically to evaluate, and the decision was made to go ahead and implement it fully. And like I said before, PMT requires that soil data to be sent to us so that we can gauge how effective it has been. The PMT uses a lot of the same things you will during your conservation plans, like the Russell II soil loss A value. It'll compare the proposed application of fertilizer and manure to the characteristics of the field or the site. And what we know is that subsurface drainage is the primary driver of the PMT. They found that phosphorus does leach when it is overly saturated, and this mostly will affect the eastern shore or lower shore, and it coincides with poultry operations that have those high soil P values. Distant surface water affects the rest of the state. So if you're If your field is close to a stream, obviously there's runoff potential, so that usually is the main driver there. And this PMT gives the plan writer a score that is able to tell the farmer what they can legally apply based on that low, medium, or high. Once you reach high, you can't apply anything. Setbacks, basically, so that you can't just apply fertilizer or manure right up to the stream. If you have animals that are in a pasture, you're going to have to fence them out with at least a 10-foot setback. There's no mandate on the type of fence. It just has to work. And other BMPs may be sufficient, but you have to work with the Soil Conservation District, which means you guys, in order to figure that out and then present that to MDA for approval. Gated stream crossings are permittable, but they can't exceed 12 feet. And you can graze the setback area, but you got to have one of those grazing plans. Fertilizer applications using broadcast method, that requires a 35-foot setback. Directed spray or injection is also a 10-foot setback. And the 10-foot setback area should not include a crop like corn or soybeans. And this is just a graphic of the setbacks and what is required based on what you're looking to do. Record keeping requirements, operators have to keep records pertaining to their nutrient management activities. So current plan, NMPs from the previous 3 years. So we look back and make sure all of them were implemented correctly. Soil analysis, manure analysis, yield records for each crop for 5 years. The plan should be written for the best 3 out of 5 years worth of yields. That's how we establish the nitrogen rate, say, for corn. And then fertilizer organic application records, receipts for any fertilizer purchase, and we also want to make sure you have your current nutrient applicator voucher. Penalties, if you don't implement a nutrient management plan after you've been warned to do so, that's up to a $5,000 fine now. And there's a minimum of $250 fine for applying phosphorus to a site that you can't. And consideration obviously is given based on the situation. Annual implementation report. This is the form that the farmers will come in waving in your face and say, I need help. This is a self-reporting form. So instead of getting every plan or reviewing every operation every year, we get this AIR. It includes information from fertilizer application to animal numbers to manure export, everything that the farmer does relating to nutrients, basically. They received that form in early January. There's a separate form for CNMP farms, and they are due by March 1st of each year. And again, it's the responsibility of the farmer to submit this form. And like Elizabeth talked about last time, this AR data is crucial for reporting within the watershed implementation plan. There's an online option that is new where farmers can go in and report their AIR online. It began last year, and I believe the plan is to phase out that paper form and steer everybody towards this Maryland one-stop portal. It's basically TurboTax for nutrient management. It works very well. I recommend it. Implementation reviews. So farmers are subject to a review of their operation periodically. These are conducted by those 9 specialists throughout the state. We give farmers 48 hours advance notice of that review, and we review that plan for completeness, accuracy, making sure it is a valid plan written by a valid person. And then we review all those application records to make sure that the farmer followed that plan. We review all the setbacks and make sure that they are in place. And at the end, we deliver whatever the findings are, whether it be a warning or a fine based upon the severity of what we find. We don't hand out fines every day, guys. That's actually very rare. We work with folks. We get a lot of issues fixed before they become, bigger problems. So the last thing I want to talk about is that current nutrient management plan certification form. For folks that have been around for a few months, you probably know about this. This is the form that basically certifies you have a current nutrient management plan. This is required for any type of state cost share through the MAX program or the Maryland cover crop program. Again, this is the responsibility of the farmer to fill out and his nutrient management consultant. So they should be submitting that with their application for whatever their proposed project or cover crop will be. And hopefully, Steve, I've met my time. And I'll take any questions.
All right, thanks.